गुजरे हुए 100 साल की तारीख गवाह है, साए की तरह साया फिगन हम पे खुदा है, हम पे खुदा है, हम पे खुदा है।
The Munir Inquiry Commission report in 1953 had clearly declared Ahmadis innocent. The Ahrari mullahs had faced the worst embarrassment ever. A judge of the High Court had taken the mask of piety off and shown their cruel and ruthless face. Mischievous as they were, they could not sit idle and not retaliate. The 1953 episode had clearly shown that courts and the law-enforcing bodies were yet beyond the gruesome reach of the mullahs, and this is what they wanted under their vicious control. They thought of an even more evil plan this time. They knew that a democratic government will bow to no one else but the people. It is the people who bring democratic governments to power, and it is the same masses that are a threat to this power. So, the mullahs now launched a hate campaign, an organized propaganda so as to incite hatred in the people's hearts.
1974 is another landmark in the history of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. That was the year when the National Assembly of Pakistan unilaterally decided against the community. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was the head of the government at that time. Under his instruction, the whole National Assembly was constituted as a small committee to hear the subject, and finally they came out with one-sided decision, without any reason, without any explanation, that the member of the community is not into the fold of Islam. This decision was taken in 1974, and before that, actually, Allah Almighty is always guiding the community, and the then Supreme Head of the community, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis III, Rahimahullah Ta'ala, he convened a special Majlis Shura in 1973. There he mentioned very carefully and very discreetly that the opposition of the religious communities is always there. But out of these difficult times of persecution, the communities always come out victorious. So he explained what is being considered in some circles and what sort of conspiracies are being hatched against the community and what seems to be the plan of the opponents to do to the Ahmadiyya. All these things, its background and its nature and what might possibly be coming out later on, that was thoroughly explained in that Majlis Shura by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih in 1973.
Now, then we reach 1974. That was the year in which the state of Pakistan declared Ahmadiyya Muslim community as a non-Muslim minority, and the constitution of Pakistan was amended accordingly, and it was actually put into the constitution that this particular minority of people, they are excluded from the definition of Muslims. Now that was quite surprising. But before I give further details, it must be mentioned that there was a background to it. As I mentioned, that after the martial law of 1953, which was unsuccessful for the so-called mullahs and those fanatic organizations of mullah, Ahrar and Jamaat Islami, the mullahs came back again in 1960s in elections when they were so-called supporting the sister of the founder of Pakistan, Muhtarma Fatima Jinnah, and they were actually in fact pursuing their own agenda underhand in order to acquire the power and to take revenge against the Ahmadis. That was unsuccessful. In 1973, after the fall of Decca and the partition of Pakistan and the segregation of East Pakistan, The government of Pakistan again was passing through a state of turmoil, where the newly elected government, which was being led by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at that time, was just barely establishing its feet on the face of the government. And that was the time when mullahs from different parties, they joined hands, and then they started building pressure on the government of Z.A. Bhutto that unless and until you declare Ahmadis as a non-Muslim minority under the constitution, we would continue creating troubles for you and we would not let you stabilize as a government.
There was something behind it, and that be it within Pakistan, the mullahs, the extremists, or even internationally, who were opposed to the Jamaat. And this pressure continued, and it was publicized a great deal that Ahmadis were against the finality of the prophethood, and that Ahmadis didn't believe in the Holy Prophet ﷺ as the final prophet of Islam. And this was given massive media attention and widespread spread amongst the uneducated masses, who took it to be true.
Bhutto was a popular leader. He was the chairman of the largest political party of Pakistan, the Pakistan People's Party. Like in any democratic state, it was the majority of people who had voted for him to be their leader. He did not want to lose his popularity. He knew that the masses had a strong hatred for Ahmadis. The demand to declare Ahmadis non-Muslim was growing day by day. This was the dilemma Bhutto was facing. Either to prove himself secular and liberal, or to prove himself loyal to the mullahs who now controlled the masses, hence the state affairs.
In the elections, during the elections of 70s, the Ahmadis had profoundly, supported People's Party, and because of their support, the People's Party could get such number of votes in Punjab and Sindh that the then government, People's Party, could make their governments in both the provinces and in the centre. So naturally all the political party, and at that time it is a fact that all religious parties, they gathered together, and it was said as if the elections were between Kafirs and Muslims. Bhutto was declared as if he was against Islam, and all the Islam Pasand, the name was called as Islam Pasand parties. That was, but all those parties, were defeated, and the people did not pay any heed towards their Islam khatre mein hai, Islam is in danger, and Bhutto will spoil the Islam. Unfortunately, having defeated the mullahs, Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, I think, was not advised, well advised, to resort to religious parties. He began, having just to prolong his power in the country, he then went to see various mullahs, even Maulana Abul Huda during the night, Maududi during the night, and tried to have their sympathies so that his power goes on or remains.
Now, in order just to save its government and to avoid temporarily the pressure that was being posed by the mullahs and different fanatic religious organizations, Z.A. Bhutto, just in order to gain his political incentives, declared Ahmadis as a non-Muslim minority under the constitution.
So Bhutto stood up to take the decision. He claimed that he will bring the Qadiani issue to a close. He knew not that he was actually bringing to an end the leftover bits of democracy in Pakistan. He knew not that he was actually bidding farewell to his own political career. Muslims have been instructed by their Prophet to remain loyal to the law of the state. The Ahmadis have thus always remained loyal and patriotic to their country. Pakistan had never accepted the existence of Ahmadis as Muslims, but Ahmadis stayed loyal to Pakistan. Bhutto, before coming to power, had a great deal of support from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, but now he needed no support. He decided to be with the pressure group. He decided not to simply ignore any goodwill that had existed between his government and the Ahmadis. He decided to put aside all contributions made by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in the establishment of Pakistan. All he wanted was to satisfy the pressure groups, be they from within or from abroad.
When the constitution was put in place in 1974, closed door session of the National Assembly was called in. And the closed door session means that in which the proceedings would be held in camera. Press and other publicizing bodies would not be allowed to actually make public the details or the debates that were going inside the assembly. Now that assembly in fact invited the Jamaat Ahmadiyya, and they invited the third caliph, Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad Rahimullah Ta'ala, who in fact led the delegation of Jamaat Ahmadiyya into the National Assembly. He was being accompanied by other most prominent scholars of Jamaat Ahmadiyya of that time. And in that session of the Assembly, a memorandum which was named as Mahzarnama was prepared. It was quite an extensive document, spanned over 250 documents, and that was filled with Quranic injunctions, verses, and also ahadith, sayings of prominent scholars of Islam, and all were pointing out in one direction that Jamaat Ahmadiyya in fact was and is the true representative of Islamic teachings. However, because it was a politically motivated session of the Assembly, they completely ignored that memorandum, and those, I would rather use the word illiterate politicians who had no business with Islamic teachings, they were then given the power to decide the fate of Jamaat Ahmadiyya, and they were given the responsibility to come up with the definition of Islam.
And so as we moved into 1974, suddenly there was a great deal of riots and attacks on Ahmadis. At the time Zulfikar Ali Bhutto headed it. They were starting to feel the pressure from the mullahs as well. Not traditionally a very extreme man, he was more concerned about being a popular figure, but he knew that this was an issue which was very important to the mullahs, who wielded a great deal of influence. And so he sent the issue to the National Assembly, who called a full assembly in 1974 to see that if Ahmadis should be declared non-Muslim. And this committee was attended by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih III, who represented the Jamaat along with 4 delegates, which included Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad. And it went on for 2 weeks. Initially the Jamaat had already sent a document in response, which was this book here, the memorandum. And upon this, then the Attorney General and the clerics decided to interview the Jamaat over those 2 weeks, and the main issue and point of contention was the issue of the finality of the prophethood. Now, what they had spread about the Jamaat was that, like I said earlier, these Ahmadis don't believe in the Holy Prophet ﷺ to be the final prophet. Now, the Ahmadiyya Jamaat's view, which has been a consistent view throughout its existence, throughout its 120-year existence, is that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was the perfect prophet, was the final law-bearing prophet, and he brought the final Sharia, which was the Holy Quran. which was revealed by God Almighty. And so we don't believe that any new Sharia can come, and the only but there is still room for prophethood in Islam, because prophethood is the ultimate gift of Allah, of God to His humans. He has sent prophets throughout the history of time to all the countries of the world. And now suddenly to say that now there's going to be no more prophethood would be deprive the future generations of the great gift from God. But only a prophet from within his faith, from within the teaching, could come. And we believe that person to be Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, who made his claim in 1889. And the reason he was the chosen one was because he was the par excellence in devotion and subservience to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No person before him and no person since has reached that level of devotion. Now the interesting and ironic issue is that the majority of non-Ahmadi Muslims, they believe that Jesus Christ alayhi salam is still alive and has been raised to heaven and will return one day to reform Islam. So they believe that prophethood will continue after the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they also believe that God Almighty has raised the status of Jesus Christ to a supernatural level, i.e. giving him life in the heavens, and that he will return in the latter days. Whereas, God forbid, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's only a human, but Jesus Christ has been given such a grand stage. The more logical and rational, in fact the only rational and logical explanation, is that a prophet will come as a new person, a new human being, who will follow the teachings of Muhammad, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the letter. And that is the point of contention, point of logic, that the mullahs in Pakistan and even the legislature in 1974 gave to the masses, that the Ahmadis had the wrong view.
During this hearing, the Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis Rahimahullah Ta'ala was called and cross-examined, and during this assembly, proceedings of the assembly, a Mazarnama by the Jamaat was tendered, and all the arguments or the reasons or grounds and our beliefs and all other things were presented to the National Assembly. They did not bother to discuss all these things, and on one fine morning, on the 7th of September, they just passed a declaration without assigning any reasons or questions or answers.
So as a result of the session, two surprising facts came out. First of all, the National Assembly of Pakistan was the first National Assembly of any country in the world who declared someone as non-Muslim in its constitution. Now second, the politicians were given the responsibility of defining who was a Muslim and who was a non-Muslim.
This is how, for the first time in the history of the world, a constitution forcefully declared a sect something which they were not. Ahmadis were told that they were non-Muslims. Unfortunately, this absurd and hostile constitutional amendment was done not by a dictator, but by a democratically elected government.
In 1974, this ordinance was announced, and when this announcement took place, after that immediately, even before that, there was wave of persecution going on in Pakistan in various places. And during that wave of persecution, which was nationwide, which was very horrible persecution, the result was that a lot of Ahmadis, they had to lay down their lives for the sake of the truth. Normally people are killed for some bad things that they do, but the Ahmadis, they were martyred for the sake of siding with the truth. And many people laid down their lives, Their houses were burned, their children were killed, ladies were killed, men were killed. All this persecution went. And it was really a very difficult moment in the history of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. But we firmly believe that Allah Almighty is always there to help the community. And that was a moment we remember very well, that the people used to come to Rabwa, the international headquarters of the community, to see Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis Rahimahullah Ta'ala, who was the source of all the inspiration and guidance and support to the member of the community. People used to come and describe to him that, well, our relatives have died, our houses have been put on fire, our business has been stopped, and all these things. They used to come in a way, they were crying and weeping. And after seeing the Khalifatul Masih, they were so much enriched and so much encouraged that when they came out, there was always a smile on their face. So that sort of encouragement and guidance and support was provided by the institution of Khilafat. And in those days I remember that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis Rahimahullah Ta'ala, he mentioned and he repeated this statement time and again, that there is no mother who can ever give birth to any child who can snatch the smiles from the faces of Ahmadis. And that was so true. The people had all the encouragement and support from the institution of Khilafat, and as a result of that, they remained loyal to the institution of Khilafat. They all remained united and went on through this mill of persecution, and sacrifices after sacrifices were given, but nobody could shake their faith. That is a noble example to remember about that year.
As soon as the Ahmadis were declared non-Muslims, the mullahs took advantage of the situation. Opportunists as they had always been, mullahs incited even more hatred in the general public. They wanted to annihilate the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, so much so that no sign of it was left. But it was a community sowed by Allah, and Allah alone was sufficient to protect it.
I mean, one of the fundamental questions is, why was the Ahmadiyya Jamaat picked upon as the one Jamaat to be persecuted in such a strong and vehement way? There's many sects of Islam. The point of issue is that each divine group, and it's a part of history, is persecuted. Islam, when it started, was persecuted, and now in the latter days Ahmadiyya is persecuted. Now we're not the only group that has been persecuted. In India, the Wahhabis were persecuted for quite some time. Sunnis often cause difficulty for the Shia population. But in the current eras, we're the only group who all the other communities of Islam, all the other sects have joined together collectively to persecute. And so and this was one of the points that was brought up in the National Assembly as well.
Now this is very strange, that the 72 sects, according to Muslim scholars, they have already been fulfilled. They say that so many groups are already there in the Muslim community. Now the 73rd one, which we claim to be the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, when this community is there in the assembly in 1974 in Pakistan, a very strange decision was taken by the political oriented leadership of Pakistan at that time. They decided, without any rhyme and reason, they said that we are on the right and the one Ahmadiyya Muslim community is on the wrong. While the decision of the Holy Prophet ﷺ was that 72 will be in the wrong and they will be hellbound, and only one will be on the right path, and that would be really representing the true Islam. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih III, Rahimahullah Ta'ala, before the final decision was announced by unilaterally by the government, he made it very clear in the assembly that you may take any decision whatever you like, but remember one point: don't take any decision which is going to be absolutely against the decision and the verdict of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. He said 72 will be wrong, one will be right. But unfortunately they didn't listen to his advice, and the decision they came out was 72 are wrong, right, and one is wrong. So one can see that all these people, they actually try to unite their hands again in the persecution of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. While the fact is that how can they do so because whatever they are doing, that is against the final verdict of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. When I look at the so-called unity of the Muslims against Ahmadiyya Muslim community, I always remember that it is actually the fulfillment of that saying that al-kufru millatun wahida, that the disbelief that has joined forces against the truth. So the truth lies with us, and the people of following disbelief, they are showing as if they are united against the truth. But that is of course not going to avail them at all.
अहमदियों के साथ जो atrocities हुई हैं, particularly government मुलाजमीन के साथ, those who were serving in the government department, they will not promote them, they will not give them good posts. It was so obvious in armed forces, in air force, in everything, in telephone department, that even the Ghair Ahmadis sometimes say this is too much, some of them.
Now, as a manifestation of this persecution, in 1974, because of the media effects, because of the whole Ahmadis being declared as non-Muslim, the public itself was riled up to a great degree. Just at the beginning of May, towards the end of May, there was one particular incident which seemed to spark everything that happened for the rest of the year. That students at Nishtar Medical College in Multan, they arrived at the Rabba railway station, and suddenly they started attacking the Ahmadis who were there. Now, in the next 48 hours, 48 Ahmadi shops and 5 homes were ransacked, 3 mosques were attacked, and then 2 days later, 15 Ahmadis in Gujranwala were martyred. And this series of events, whether it be ransacking, whether it be looting, whether it be attacking, whether it be killing, continued throughout the year, and even post the change of law in September. And it wasn't just physical attacks, there was also social boycotts that were placed on Ahmadis. Many were refused entry into different shops to get their basic groceries. There was one particular village where the Ahmadis had actually purchased some food from the local shop, and then the local shopkeepers later came to find out that these were Ahmadis, and so they went round with their henchmen, with their people, and took the goods back from them forcibly, removing them from someone's home. These are, I mean, small incidents, but no Ahmadi could live in peace at that time. And water supplies were cut, basic necessities such as wheat and crops, other such crops, restrictions were placed upon them. So Ahmadis were unable to live a normal existence. Then you move to education and employment. With regards to employment, many Ahmadis were deprived promotions which they rightly deserved. Many were fired from their jobs simply because they were Ahmadi, and their employees didn't want to be tarnished as the people who promote Ahmadis. And then many Ahmadis served in the military. Some of them had to stay at a certain low rank just because they were Ahmadis. Others chose to leave the army.
I myself is a victim of this. When I came to know that why I was posted out of Islamabad, I saw with my own eyes written on my file by Bhutto himself that this officer should be posted out of Islamabad, should never be allowed to come to Islamabad, and should not be permitted to leave the country.
Pakistan became the most unsafe place for Ahmadis on earth. But, on the other hand, was the teaching of patriotism and loyalty for homeland. Ahmadis decided to cling to their love and loyalty for their homeland. Despite their hatred and rejection from society, Pakistani Ahmadis continued and still continue to live in their homeland. A huge number of Ahmadis are serving Pakistan in every possible way. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community continues to invest resources and manpower in the best interest of Pakistan.
गुज़रे हुए 100 साल की तारीख़ गवाह है गुजरे हुए 100 साल की तारीख गवाह है, साए की तरह साया फिगन हम पे खुदा है, हम पे खुदा है, हम पे खुदा है।